thank you very much, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us in this another live Instagram live. So basically, in this one, we are gonna talk about a myth that basically every week our customers ask us. Basically the foreign ones. It's basically the question is, can a foreign buy property in Mexico? Is it legally possible to buy property in Mexico? Well, today we are gonna give the answer and all the information regarding to that question. And in order to do so, here we have Daniel Castellanos, who will help us provide all that information. So Daniel, if you would like to introduce yourself to our audience.
Thank you so much, Penny. First of all, I'm so grateful and thank you for the invitation. It's so excited to be here. And yes, I am Daniel Castellanos. I am an attorney and also commercial manager for Secure Title Latin America. And yes, I've been some years working and assisting, helping Mexican and international clients acquiring property here in Mexico. And it's nice to help them navigate the process, And I can tell you the answer to this question, yes, the clients can buy property in Mexico legally and safely. And there are thousands of Americans, Canadians, Europeans, and people from over the world buying properties in Mexico, investing in real estate in different parts of Mexico. So yes, thank you.
Okay, so basically the first question has been answered. Yes, foreigners can own property in Mexico, and it is legally for them to own property. So in order to do that, there is this Mexican bank trust, which is the Fideicomiso. But another question before we get into the details for that is every foreigner who wants to buy a property in Mexico, everyone needs this bank trust, this Fideicomiso?
Okay. The answer to that is no.
Okay.
Not necessarily everyone needs the Fideicomiso or the bank trust. It depends on the location of the property. Okay. If the foreigner is acquiring a property, a real estate within the restricted zone, yes, they will need a Fideicomiso. If they are buying a property that is outside the restricted zone, then they will not need a Fideicomiso. In here, what we do is they can obtain direct title by obtaining a permit from our Mexican Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
Okay, perfect. So basically, not everyone needs a bank trust in order to legally own property in Mexico. And you talk about restricted area. Can you give us more information? Can you clarify what the restricted area is and what is not?
Yes. According to our Mexican Constitution, the restricted zone is an area that is 100 kilometers from the international borders and 50 kilometers from the coastlines all over Mexico. And I know these areas are restricted for foreigners to own, but I will explain during this conversation how is it that they do, okay? Because basically the difference here is that the structure of the ownership for foreigners in this area is a little different, but yes, it is possible.
Okay, perfect. So basically, a lot of foreigners who they are trying to buy property in Mexico, they're looking by the beaches because obviously the beach in Mexico are really, really beautiful. So those are restricted areas, right? And right now, for example, I'm here in Tijuana, and in Tijuana, we are by the border, basically crossing to the United States. So that means that is also a restricted area, not the whole city of Tijuana, but part of it.
Yes, and I can add to that most of the most beautiful places that, all the foreigners wants to buy a property are within the restricted zone. Los Cabos, Puerto Vallarta, Tulum, Cancun, Rosarito, Puerto Peñasco, different places, So that's why it's important that we understand how this works. because thousands of foreigners and for decades have been acquiring property and investing very safely here.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for that information, Daniel. Now we have, a lot of things more clear. And the other question then, now that we do know that not everyone needs a trust and what are the areas or the locations that is needed, can you explain us what a trust is and what is made for? What's the purpose of it?
Yes, thank you so much for that question. And I always says, before we go, to explain the Fideicomiso and how it works, I would like to explain first why it exists. As lawyers, we always says to understand the law, we need to understand the reasons behind it. And in this case, a little history, very short. After Mexico, or once Mexico got the independence, the country suffered certain, invasions from another countries or military conflicts, and these were happening in the borders, international borders, or in the coastlines. That's why part of the strategic that the government took and with the Constitution, it was the Constitution established restrictions to all foreigners to acquire direct property in these areas. In this way, the Constitution protects the sovereignty of the country. Okay, later on, Mexico opens its economy to the foreign investors. So we want more money, right, from other people who wants to come here. And that's what they did. Instead of just put away all these protections from the Constitution, what the lawmakers made or created, it was a legal mechanism for foreigners to acquire property within this area. And this legal mechanism or legal vehicle is going to help not only, it's helping in two purposes. One, is helping to conserve all these principles of protection by the Constitution of Mexico, but also is helping to make possible that foreigners can acquire ownership in the restricted zone in a safe way. So in the end, this legal mechanism is the bank trust, is the Fideicomiso, which is the way to achieve this goal and protect, conserve the Constitution, and conserve and help and allow foreigners to buy property in Mexico.
Okay, great, perfect. Mm-hmm. And basically, if a property is bought through a bank trust, who owns the property? Basically, our customers is saying, then I don't own the property and the owner is the bank. Is that true?
No. This is a very common question. I think it's misunderstood or misunderstanding, misconception of what is it. The bank doesn't own the property. You as a client, foreigner, you own it. The bank, it is just a trustee. And as a trustee, its responsibility is to manage the trust and also follow your instructions as an owner. In the end, you as a client, as a foreigner buyer, you control the property.
So when you mentioned you control the property, whenever a customer is going through this process, they have a lot of questions like, can I rent it? Can I use it as an Airbnb property? Can I sell it after? Because they don't have clear who's the owner of the property and what rights do they have over the property. So can you give us more information about that?
Yes, of course. Okay, so the client is the direct beneficiary of the trust, and he has all the rights as an owner of the property. He can use it, rent it, lend it, inherit, and he can sell it later on. We have to remember that this bank trust is for 50 years, renewable, and also important that the client, the owner, can appoint substitute beneficiaries. So if something happens to them, the substitute beneficiaries can claim the title of this property, of the trust.
Okay. And you mentioned something about renewable every 50 years. So what happens, I mean, a question that they have is what happens if I don't renew it? Do I lose the property? Or is this renewal process like automatic at the end of the first 50 years? How that process works?
Okay. Usually, this given a period of time is to have a little control. That's why the bank, as the trustee, is to manage and administer, these the trust. But before the time is over, that's why the bank will ask you to appoint substitute beneficiaries. Because if the time to finish is coming, they will ask you, are you ready to renovate or you don't want to renovate? And if they don't answer, they will contact the beneficiaries because they need somebody who be the title holder of that property. The bank cannot have it, cannot keep it, and this reminds me. Maybe I'm gonna go to another question because it's direct. Is many clients are afraid sometimes. What if the bank goes out of business? Can they just lose my property? And the answer is no. If something like this will happen, because it had happened before, this bank trust will be assigned to another bank. So another bank will be the trustee, but you keep your rights as a property owner. Okay?
Okay, so basically, and thank you very much for mentioning, because a lot of customers of my own, they have also asked me that, what happens if the banks goes out of business? And basically what you're mentioning is that they transfer, let's say, their customers to another bank to keep managing the trust.
Exactly. And another question that is related that sometimes I also get is what happens if I don't pay the annual fees, or how many years if I don't pay, I might lose my property, the bank will keep it. And the answer is, I've been in this business for years. We are working with different banks in Mexico, the most common banks that do this business. It's also important to mention that all these banks, most of them are not the commercial typical banks that people know, because sometimes the clients request a commercial bank, a brand name that they know. But not all of these banks have a fiduciary for real estate purposes, a section. So the ones that are big on this area for fiduciary, there are several. I can mention some examples, but I have talked to them and I have asked this: what happened if the client didn't pay the annual fee? What happened about all the delays, any arrears or something? And the bank tells me, usually they don't charge you nothing extra, and they know that eventually the client will do a movement. Eventually the client will want to transfer the title, sell it to third-party person, or to transfer to the substitute beneficiaries, or any change. So when the client requests the change, the bank will ask you to update, to bring everything to, on
Current.
all your payments. It's at the current, exactly. So if they haven't paid 2-3 annual fees, they will have to come with that payment. So in that way, the bank recovers whatever it has not been paid. But the bank will not keep the property. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Because basically, everything behind all of these questions is for our customers being afraid of losing the property,
Yeah.
because I forgot to make the annual fee, or I forgot to communicate to the bank, and then everything that I bought, everything that I owned, I just suddenly lose it. So that's not the case. That's not going to happen, because basically the purpose of the bank is to administrate that property and to ensure its legal, status in the country and with that specific customer. So now that we know what a bank trust is and why it was created, then how the process to open a bank trust. I mean, we have a customer who wants to buy, we have a foreign who wants to buy property in Mexico. So can you guidelines through the process? They have choose the place already, and we are on the closing process for that property. What's the steps that they need to follow?
Okay. Well, first, I recommend the clients do not navigate all this process by your own, and always, go with professional team who are experienced, who know the process, who has been done before, like professionals, real estate team, like I know, like in your case, like what you do, because that's the most important. So because you're going to make sure not only to advise the client properly, but also to make sure all the legal documents, the process, the parties are involved, and many little things that we have to consider since the beginning to get a proper assistance, and not wait later on the process. Oh, surprises, surprises that obstruct the process and provoke or cause delays in the process. Okay, the Fideicomiso is very simple. And of course, you have to mention it depends every transaction, because every transaction is different, and it depends who is the seller, if that is a company or is a natural person, who is the buyer, the location of the property, if you need a bank trust or if you don't need it, you need the permit. Also, I know you are a very big professional team that you practice also the due diligence before any property is offered. That's the most important since the beginning, right? But in few words, the closing process is once we have all the documents, like condominium regime and contract and everything, we're going to get a permit from the Mexican Ministry of Foreign Affairs. This permit, we work with the notary, with the seller, we do fiduciary bank, and we're going to get organized until we get a deed of this setup of the bank trust, and then we sign it before the notary. Now, I think it's important to mention that the process is not finished with the signing of the deed before the notary, but we have to make sure this deed is recorded in the public registry office. So that is the final part. And that's to make sure everything is recorded and is fine.
Yeah. And you know what, probably this process to our audience, probably this sounds like overwhelming, a lot of different papers, a lot of different processes that I need to follow. What we would like to tell you is that you don't need to take care of that, because that's the purpose of our work. Basically, we in LIV, like you mentioned, Daniel, we do the due diligence of the property that we are going to sell, and we ensure what's the legal status of this. And basically, something that you mentioned, we do even have sold properties that were owned by an American under a trust, and then needs to be sold to another American. So that's a different state that, like you mentioned, every transaction is different. So yeah, that's what we do. We do the due diligence of the property that it is going to be sold, and also we do the coordination of all the parties, because here we need to coordinate the notary. We need to coordinate with you, for example, if there's a bank trust needed for this transaction, and also with the bank if there's a financing going through the transaction. So all those parties and all those processes, that's our job, to coordinate them and to make the process as smooth as possible to our customer.
Yes. And I want to say congratulations, because I know as an attorney, I face sometimes, I meet clients that their real estate advisor was not there for them, or they didn't do this job. And then the client is, like, I don't know where to go, I don't know who to talk to. So it is so nice as a professional that you are there all the time, all the way with your clients.
Yeah, and that is really important, because we do understand that most of our customers are their first time buying overseas or outside the country, and the process in the USA is completely different than the one in Mexico. So So they are wanting to be in the same process that they are accustomed to in the USA, in Mexico, and it is not. So that's why we go through them every step of the process to give them as much information as possible for them to feel safe, secure, and in confidence of the step that they are doing. And regarding the transaction that I mentioned, for example, and basically the question to you, what we did that in that moment is that we basically transfer the ownership of the bank trust from one customer to the other, because the bank trust already existed and it was just transfers the benefit of it. It didn't need it to be closed and then open again. It was just a transfer of rights. Can you give us more information about that?
Yes, exactly. That's very interesting because here also, this is what we call in law assignment of rights. Is the original owner is an American or a foreigner, so it's already a bank trust, and the new buyer is also an American or a foreigner, and there is no need to set up a new bank trust. The question is sometimes is how long does this bank trust have left, out of the 50 years? If it is still enough time, they say, let's keep it. If they feel like it's too short, example, because they already was 45 years and they only have 5 years left, you could, if you want, the new buyer, set up a new one. But it is up to them. And this is the easiest way. Just assignment of rights is the original beneficiary of this trust gets out of the bank trust and the new one gets in. And he is going to appoint the new beneficiary. Another example, if this a foreigner who owns the property wants to sell it to a Mexican, the Mexican will not need a bank trust for a property in the restricted zone because as a national, they don't have these requirements. So what do we do? It's also very simple. We terminate or we close this bank trust and we transfer the property as a private property to this Mexican who is buying there.
Okay.
So yes, and there are other examples I know that could be specific, and that's why I said since the beginning it's important to analyze the transaction. I know that's what you do, and I know you are very professional, and because example, the client who wants to buy the property, I don't want to buy it on my name. I want to buy it using my LLC. Or I want to buy it using my retirement funds, the IRA. So is that possible? All the banks, the fiduciary bank accepted. Probably not all the fiduciary banks will accept it because sometimes it's more complex. But yes, it is possible, and there are banks who accept it. What is the complexity of the thing of here is due to anti-money laundering laws, the banks will require you more documents. If you're buying with an LLC, they will require all the documents of the company, all the articles of incorporation, all the shareholders' information. The authority wants to find out who is the final person who controls the company. So, and all these documents have to be translated in apostille. So that's why maybe the process, usually a process for closing will take about 2 months, but with these situations, it will take you probably 4 or 5 months. It depends of the documents and how long you take to get all these extra steps. But it is possible. So everything is possible. We just need to know how to do it and get a good advice like a team of professionals like you do.
Thank you very much, Daniel. And yeah, actually, you mentioned something very important regarding the timing, and that is really important for us to be honest with our customers and not to give probably false expectations about when we are going to be closing. So regarding timing and cost, what our customers can, you mentioned right now an example, what's the average being just one person buying to another one and they need to open a bank trust. What's the average timing and the average cost of that?
Yes, the average time that we find everything is there is 2 months. to get all the process. And of course, as I mentioned, it depends on the transaction. If any document, we have to go through different authorities in Mexico and sometimes bureaucracy, but it could take longer, but it depends on that. But basically, the most common, if everything is ready, is 2 months to get that ready. And okay, 2 months to get the signing the deed before the notary. And this is also, I always recommend the agents clarify with your client what closing day is. Because for many Americans and Canadians, closing day will be the ideal. The closing day is I pay, I sign the deed, and I take possession of the property. The three things the same day. But in Mexico, sometimes there are a lot of pre-construction, sales, and different cases that sometimes closing could be just signing the deed, and maybe the physical possession it took before the closing and the deed. And also, once you sign the deed, you have to consider about probably 3 to 6 months to get the final hard copy of the deed. One is recorded in the public registry office. So, but since you signed the deed, it is there. It's yours. It's a celebration. And then just make sure this second last part is happening. Okay.
Yeah, and that is really important that you mentioned, because what we do in our process whenever a bank transfer is involved is that we start all the different process aligned, at the same time. The property appraisal, the bank approval, the trust, and everything. And as we did already the due diligence for the property, we are ready to start because we already have all the information regarding the seller and regarding the property, and we are just acquiring the documentation for the seller. So that is something that we do in order to try to reduce the process as much as possible and to keep everything going, on the same line to try to reduce the timeline. And
That's
now,
nice.
regarding the cost, what are the costs involved and the frequency of them in on average?
Okay. Of course, again, it depends of the bank and it depends of the specific transaction. But the most common amount that you're going to spend to set up a bank trust from zero is about $2,500. And
Okay.
what does this include? This includes the permit from the Foreign Affairs, the first annual fee, and the setup of the bank trust. So an average about the annual fee to the bank trust is about between $550 to $800. It
Okay.
depends on the bank, but also it depends if there is a financing, because when there is a financing involved, it's a little more expensive. Okay, but it's about it. And I know there is another common question. Foreigners, they say, how can a foreigner buy a property in Mexico in the restricted zone without using a bank trust? Is that possible? And the answer is yes.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Yes. Well, this is another path to follow, but I always says we have to explain the client all the scenarios and everything that is involved. Another way, this is when the client set up a Mexican corporation. Yes?
Okay.
When you open a Mexican corporation, even if you're a foreigner, because you're opening a Mexican corporation, the one that will buy the property is a Mexican entity.
Yeah.
So there is no need of the bank trust. But I always said, we have to explain the client what is involved, because sometimes it's easy just open a Mexican corporation so I don't have to pay the annual fee, but surprise, the lawyer didn't mention that it is necessary to have an accounting to make sure that you follow all the taxes authorities requirements, obligations, and also every year authorities, especially for taxes, Hacienda, always give extra work, extra responsibilities, extra obligations. So sometimes it's more expensive than just setting a bank trust. you know. So it depends what do you want to do. If you want to buy many properties, make a business out of them, probably it's better to set up a Mexican corporation and you hire an accountant and it's going to do all your, you know, all the work and obligations that the authority asks you. But if you're buying, I don't know, 3 properties in different locations and you use them, you know, sometimes you rent it in Airbnb, sometimes you use it, sometimes, you know, probably it's easier just set up a bank trust, because later when you want to sell it, it will be easier to make the transfer and the movement.
Yeah, and that is very interesting that you mentioned, because I have faced, you know, customers who were told to do that, open a Mexican company, buy through that, but the realtor, they never told you all the administrative burden that they will have with the company that they open. They need to do monthly you know, tax declaration, annual tax declarations. They need to have an accountant. There's additional. So that's a good option, and we have offered to our customers, but we need to be clear about, you know, sometimes you could spend a little bit more on the trust, but you just forget about it because someone else is going to do the administration for you, rather than opening a Mexican company and then you need to take care of that, or you need to find someone, or at least the realtor can, help you finding a good accountant, right? So tell us about now the biggest mistakes that a foreign could do whenever trying to buy property in Mexico.
I think from my experience, one of the biggest mistakes is trying to do by themselves first, because they are not familiar, and sometimes they think the system is going to be similar to their own countries, and of course it's different, you know. And second, of course, is that they don't surround with a professional team. We need to surround with a professional team, professional advisors who are there for you, who has the knowledge, who has all the work, and that's, for me, that will be the first one, the most important. Find a professional team that will guide you everywhere and assist you and be with you. And I said, it's like a very personal service. And I think that's what you do. And I really congratulate you because of that, you know. And I know you do different parts of Mexico, which is great, because you also are aware of the differences between different markets. Even if we're in Mexico, we're in the same place, the same country, but there are some peculiarities, you know, in the north, in the south, in the Riviera Maya, Los Cabos, here and there.
Yeah.
And it's important that we know those differences to make it easier for our clients. And the third, I will say, probably sometimes the clients just focus on the property, but they don't focus on making sure that they understand the process. You know, and understanding the process is important. And I know it's hard to understand the whole thing, but that's why we need people like you who help the clients, you know, to go with them. So that's what I could share with you.
Yeah, and also, you know, at the end, we do understand that real estate, it's like a net. It's a wide net of connections, of partners that you get alliance to, like with you, with your company, who can help us guiding our customers, and we can be specialized, you know, in our task, and then you can work along someone who will be specialized in bank trust, for example, and can provide all the information to the customer whenever they need it. Any question that they might have, anything that they need to go through because it's specific to the transaction that they are doing. So yeah, that definitely is making the transaction for the customer a lot easier.
Penny, now I have a question for you.
Oh my God.
No, it's just a simple one. What have you seen is the most common mistake the clients do?
You know what? The biggest one that I have seen is that they don't know that they can legally own property in Mexico, and they are too afraid of that. And the other one is that we try, as we do understand the process in the USA, because you mentioned we are here in the border across to San Diego, Cancun, etc. San Miguel de Allende is full of foreign people. So we do understand how the process works for them, and we try to replicate as possible that. For example, we use escrow for the transactions for them because they are used to that. They are too afraid of giving the money to the owner of the property, and then the owner of the property could disappear, for example. So you know what? We offer them the escrow service, the bank trust service, and basically that's the biggest thing is that, oh, but I didn't know. And they are so afraid of being, that probably losing their money or getting into a transaction that it wasn't real. So that's why we try to gather all the information and gather all these specialists like you, for example, in order to make the customer feel safe, secure, and enjoy the process of buying a property in Mexico rather than feeling like they need to get aware of everything because they could lose their money at any time. That's basically what we try to avoid for them to feel.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I agree with you. And I would like to add just one more thing that is in the benefit of the clients, not only having professionals like you and your team, but also that I have seen now every time in all over Mexico, this profession is being more regulated. There are more eyes on what do we do and what we're doing with our clients, with our transactions, and that helps the clients because they can be more confident if this is a realtor that has a license, who is an MLS or is different associations that help to be professional. Because if you are not, I think one of the most important and the hardest things to build as a professional is your reputation. And it will take a long time to build it and be there and people know you, and you can lose it in a second. That's why I think it's the most important, and our clients will be the witness of this professionalism that you show all the time with them.
Okay, so in order to do a wrap up of this live that we have made through, so I'm going to go through different questions and you can provide the answer. So it will be like a summary. So foreign can legally own property in Mexico.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear that.
Yeah, can foreign legally own property in Mexico?
Yes, absolutely yes.
Okay. Does everyone who wants to buy a property in Mexico needs a bank trust?
No, absolutely no.
Okay. What are the regions or the properties that needs a bank trust?
For foreigners who are looking for a real estate property in the restricted zone, which is 100 kilometers from the international borders and 50 kilometers from the coastlines.
Okay. The bank trust is open with the bank. Does the bank own the property, controls it?
No. The bank is just a trustee, the client who is the one who controls the property.
Okay. So the customer can rent it, can put it on Airbnb, can sell it, can give it to their sons, for example.
That's correct. The client, the owner has all the rights as an owner of a property.
Yes. Okay, perfect. And at the end, can they sell it?
Yes, they can sell it. And of course, following the process, it depends who the buyer is.
Okay, perfect. And what's the length of the timing for the bank trust?
It is 50 years renewables.
Okay, perfect. So I think we have a perfect summary then that we can share with our customers. And anything else that you would like to add, Daniel?
Any assistant, I know they can come with you, and you can also come with us for the legal part as a bank trust, and we're happy to assist you. I think is that Mexico is always a nice place to be. It's nice, warm weather, and warm people also here.
Yeah, and you know what I really like is now a lot of people all over the world know Mexico, better feeling about what Mexico is and what means living in Mexico. So thank you very much, Daniel, for joining us. Thank you very much for all the valuable information that you share with the audience. And of course, we will keep working together.
Thank you so much. My pleasure. Gracias.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.